Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to let everyone else join. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar today on 5 manager tips to motivate your millennial teams. Mala Graywall, our founder and CEO, will be hosting today's webinar. If you have any housekeeping items, please note them in the chat box on the GoToMeeting and let me know. And we will be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please write your questions in the chat box and we'll address them. And then finally, as soon as the webinar is over, please answer the questions for feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead, Mala.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some of you, our West Coast friends over there. Hopefully everyone is having a very wonderful Thursday. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us on 5 manager tips to motivate your millennial teams. We appreciate the time, and we'll get right into it. So when we say the word motivation, the definition that you should see on your screen is what we're referring to. Motivation is the amount of energy, creativity, and commitment that we bring to our jobs, ourselves, and our teams. And so when we think about it, I'm curious, how many of you are asking yourself this question who are on the line today? How can I thrive in versus survive in motivating myself and my teams? I'm curious, how many of you have felt like you're really hopeful about your millennials or your younger team members. You feel really good about them, but you're not quite sure how to keep them consistently engaged. Or how many of you are concerned about consistently being motivated yourself, or keeping your motivation up when you have to give feedback constantly to a millennial, or when you don't understand the way that they're approaching work, or why they're late to something, or why they've missed some details? How many of you have struggled or are trying to figure out, geez, how can I keep these folks motivated, right? And what's their language? How do I speak to them? So if you're asking yourself any of these kinds of questions, you're in the right spot right now. So this webinar is for you if, number one, you're an expert at what you do, or you want to be an expert at what you do. Number two, you are committed to motivation, to motivating not only yourself, but others. And it could be your team members, it could be your clients, it could be people outside of your department, wherever it is, you're committed to engagement. Number three, maybe you are a manager, an individual contributor, or a senior leader that has influence to lead or to be led. This webinar is also for you if you're willing to implement the strategies that you'll learn today, to have motivating conversations that at the end result build trusted relationships with your teams. That's what it's all about. And our promise to you is that we'll teach you a proven step-by-step strategy so that you can, number one, quickly identify how to motivate yourself. Number two, strategically teach your team to motivate themselves. And number three, consistently conduct what we call motivating conversations, right, to build those relationships of trust with your teams. And we promise there's nothing for sale on this webinar, but we do have a really cool gift for you. So if you stay to the end, when you stay to the end, we'll be happy to reveal what this gift is, but we are confident that you will enjoy it. Most of our clients do. All right, so question for those of you logged in. Does this sound like you? And I'm going to show a few quotes that we find resonate with our clients and probably resonate with you. Oh man, is there a script out there that I can give these managers? Like, are our managers really that unaware of how to engage their direct reports? And maybe you're working with a lot of first-time managers, new managers, and you're thinking that. Another thought, my managers really don't have an idea of how to talk to their teams, how to motivate us. And then you're thinking about a particular manager, he's doing it all wrong. It feels like when the team gets together, no one listens, and it's going in one ear and out the other. 3, there has to be an easier way to motivate our teams. We've got to be able to train managers on how to do this more confidently and more efficiently, right? Okay, does this sound like your managers? I wake up at night in a panic, replaying conversations I've had to have to motivate my team, or one team member in particular. I'm stressed out about my upcoming one-on-one. This is with an employee, and she's always disengaged. That's what it feels like to me. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm constantly thinking about my goals I'm trying to achieve, and I'm wondering if I'm going to meet them, the ones that I set at the beginning of the year. I hope I am. Or, you know, it's my full-time job to keep my millennials engaged. I swear they ask me how they're doing every single day, or every hour of every single day, wanting this feedback, right? And then last but not least, does this sound like your leadership team? Oh, it's the end of the quarter again. Time to have another one-on-one with my first-time managers. Right? Insert sarcasm there. I'm spending way too much time on people-related matters and not enough on revenue-generating activities. I secretly wish I knew how to motivate my millennials more quickly and keep them engaged so I could use my time more effectively. Time is my currency, right? So if any of these sound like you, which we're guessing they do, and you've had these thoughts, you're in the right spot. And what we say is, you know, and we both know on the line that you're not the issue. Right? Like this is your team's issue or leadership's issue or who you fill in the blank whose issue it is. But at the same time, you are the issue. And we don't say that. Please don't take offense to that. But at the same time, I'm the issue. Caroline's the issue. You're not the issue. So what do we mean by this? How many of you are waiting for a team member to eventually get it? Like they get it. How many of you are working with a team member that just doesn't seem to get it no matter what you do? And maybe this individual, they kind of get it, but yeah, they still don't get it. And the problem is they just don't seem to get what you get. And you've tried everything, literally everything. And the breaking news in this webinar is that it's actually your job, especially as a leader or a manager of a team, to motivate your team to be excited about what you're excited about. That may not be intuitive to your team members or one in particular. And the bottom line is that you and we as leaders, we can't expect others to be motivated by the same things that motivate us, which is why we're going to walk you through some motivation data, how to leverage that today. But a lot of times in our roles, especially when time is of the essence, when we have a lot on our plate, when things are on fire, we expect people to be motivated or engaged by the same things that get us going. And that's not necessarily the case at all. A quick example on Team Talent Catalyst. This is just an example of Caroline and myself, where Caroline had requested to me for some time to share screens and when we're having meetings, exchanging information. And I've never had a problem sharing screens, but sometimes a phone call seems so much quicker to me, and I get the same information. So I'm pretty good with just the call, and I'm set. Well, I realized that Caroline's not, and instead of judging that, I started sharing screens. And she compromised and took calls when timing was quick or when it wasn't absolutely immediate or urgent to share screens. And what I found is that Caroline, and she can speak to this at some point, but I found that her engagement levels went up. Like, she was more focused. And I think that's the key word here. She was just much more focused in our meetings as a result of being able to visually see what I was describing or what we were working on. So I wasn't expecting that. I'm motivated by something different. And the data shows that on the back end. But the bottom line, at Talent Catalyst, we're a team. And we work together toward a common purpose, right, which is to increase the productivity and the profitability at the end of the day of your younger workforce and all of you on this line leading them. And how we motivate each other as a team here at Talent Catalyst dictates our ability to win. And that's what it's about at the end of the day. We want to make sure that your workforce and your team is thriving at work every day, meaning they're motivated versus surviving work every day. And I think we know the difference between the two. So on today's webinar, we're going to touch on a couple of things. Number one, primarily how to motivate ourselves and our employees. Number two, that links to delivering tough feedback and having tough conversations. We'll talk about establishing some clear expectations between one another, how you can get buy-in from resistant team members, how you can overall have conversations that generate higher ownership and productivity out of yourself and your team members, and then we'll touch on creating team norms, which will make sense as we go through this. And why this matters for today's workforce is primarily around motivation or engagement. It's the lowest it's ever been in the history of the United States. Take a look at these statistics. Some of these will be new to you and some of them won't. But the reality is they're real, and we've never seen numbers like this. Only 21% agree. This is all Gallup data, excuse me. This is Gallup's 2016 employee engagement data. Only 21% strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. And when we say them, we're talking about the American workforce. Only 18% strongly agree that employees who perform better grow faster at their organization. That's one to pause over, right? The link to performance and promotion is not direct to more than 80% of people who took this. And then the most widely cited reason underlying turnover intentions all had to do with people's direct manager. People don't quit jobs. You know the adage, they quit managers. So how can we equip you to manage more confidently and successfully? It not only impacts today's workforce, it impacts today's economy. There's this economic shift, right? It's shifted from large companies promising this lifelong employment to freelance jobs and migratory careers. And we're speaking specifically about millennials here, right? Millennials who aren't necessarily interested in lifelong employment at all, right? And this freelance option looks a lot more compelling. Today's economy, to succeed in it, you've got to decide how you are going to spend your time and allocate your energy. A lot of millennials aren't working for large institutions. They're working for startups. They're working for themselves. And who's ever taught them how to spend their time and allocate their energy? And then third bullet here is allowing employees to make decisions is now more important than ever because there's more autonomy in the workforce. And each choice that employees make reinforces this perception of self-control and self-efficacy, which we'll speak to in correlation with motivation coming up here. Just by way of introduction, Caroline already introduced me, but we study millennials at Talent Catalyst. We're millennial experts. We're also studying iGen, which is Gen Y for some of you on the line, the generation directly after millennials. And we run a human capital consultancy, which is what Talent Catalyst is. And you'll see here's just some companies that are also having this conversation. They're engaged in this dialogue. Ernst & Young, Disney, Salesforce, Apple, Marriott are engaged in the conversation around how do I motivate my millennials? How do I create successful first-time managers with my millennials? How do I bridge this gen gap if I have a team that's multi-generational? What do I do? So these are the things we talk about, and specifically on this webinar today, what we're going to solve for is how to motivate your teams. So we're going to give you our top 5 tips for thrivival instead of survival. Okay, so with that, let's go into tip number 1. Number 1, give your team members opportunities to choose. Now, this is pretty intuitive. This is not rocket science here. And in fact, none of the tips that we show you are going to be rocket science. Some of them will be very familiar, but we're going to reinforce things that perhaps you already know and give you a reminder. So, and some tools that are different, and I'll help you approach it. Opportunities to choose. So here's what we mean by this. We know in our study of motivation that motivation is triggered by making choices that demonstrate we're in control. Your millennials love being in control. We all do. That's a human desire, right? To be in control and confident and own things. And you know on the line that the specific choices we make matter less than the assertion of control. You actually may not know that. It's a really interesting idea that it's not actually what we're choosing. It's the assertion that we are in control. And this feeling of self-determination is what gets our team members going. Do they have the autonomy to choose things? Are they in control of the outcomes that they get, the outcomes we get as a team? And what we've also discovered is that a strong internal locus of control is a learned skill. It can be influenced through training, through feedback, and it's linked to higher self-motivation, social maturity, lower incidence of stress on the job and depression, and it actually leads to a longer lifespan, which is good news for all of us. And we also know that motivation is linked to these individual decisions, and the decisions convince us that we're in control, and they endow our actions to have larger meaning and purpose, which are probably two buzzwords you've heard about millennials. These are very important things to be in control of, which is the purpose of not just your career, but of your life. This purple quote is from Kim, who wrote Radical Candor, Kim Scott. And she said that in a meeting she had with Sheryl Sandberg, one interaction, she said, "It made me want to solve my own problems immediately and appreciate Sheryl, and it inspired to give me better guidance to my team." So what had happened is Kim was fairly new to the team at Google, and she was really intimidated. She had to present to senior management her third or fourth week on the job, and as she turned the corner coming out of the meeting, she actually felt pretty good about it. Turned the corner, and Sheryl was standing around the corner, and her immediate thought was, "Oh no, like maybe I didn't do as well as I thought." And Sheryl actually called her by name, looked her in the eye, and went into 3 or 4 things that had gone exceptionally well, and then asked Kim what she thought didn't go as well, or a place where she got stuck. And Kim remembers that because she went, "Whoa, I did not expect that." And Sheryl wanted me to solve my own problem. So it's a really cool story that you can read about in her book, Radical Candor. And we just want to show you some work that we've done with Marriott. And the woman in the kind of earth green shirt, her name is Michelle. She's an incredible leader. And this is her team who runs different properties, manages different properties in the Caribbean and Latin American region. And the motivation out of this team and working with them for 2 days was really memorable to us at Talent Catalyst because of the way Michelle led. She led in a very, she motivated her team by asking them questions. She motivated her team by assuming that all of them, even if they were underperforming in a certain area or inconsistent, all of them had the ability to learn, and all of them had the ability to perform at a higher level than they were perhaps performing that day or that week or quarter. And so her team felt that. They were empowered by her because they were running their own individual properties, which is a distinction. But Michelle always held them in the sense that they were in control. They were in complete control of their individual property, and she treated them and motivated them by giving them that control and backing that up with the support and the tools and really the time. So just a cool example of how, when people are given choice, they really self-motivate. And we want to show you one of the models we use with the Marriott is this this example of what we call the Emoticon effect. And so what this is showing is that the quality of the work experience, and I'll speak to Marriott, they know that they're in the hospitality industry, right? So they know that the quality of their performance at the Marriott is a result of the quality of the relationships they build with their customers or the customer experience they have. And they treat themselves the same way internally. And so what the Emoticon effect is showing is that we can either survive the relationships that we have at work, or we can thrive in them. And when we're surviving them, we call those relationships, I can't even, like, I don't want to. And how many of you on the line have been in a relationship where you feel like you have to be in it? I have to call this person. I have to talk to my landlord. I have to talk to my manager. I have to give feedback to my millennial. Versus the thriving with your millennial teams, which is, oh my gosh, I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to give feedback, or I can't wait for the next one-on-one, or I can't wait for our team meeting to see what our millennials have, what results they produced, et cetera, right? And so at Talent Catalyst, we teach our clients that you can shift the way that your relationships go one conversation at a time, right? And how we motivate is by really knowing our people, by having data on them, not just assuming we know what they're like by their personality or like how they've acted in one meeting or another meeting, but really like gathering data on them and leveraging that in all the conversations we have with them. And so that by this example, we can shift from survive to thrive. And so with this in mind, our Thrive tip number 1 is choice. It's all about choice and giving people choice. So instead of directing our people, what would it look like in our organizations to let them self-direct more often than we direct? It would take less work for us and give more ownership to them which is in and of itself very motivating. Okay, let's go to tip number 2 for Thriveval. Create unified teams. Again, probably a goal of yours. This is something that you want, but how do we do it, and how do we do this consistently? And we found that one trick, if you haven't already done so, is creating team norms, which are the unwritten rules. And you'll see here the Golden State Warriors logo down here. The Golden State Warriors are brilliant at these team norms. And Steph Curry is really known for being a team player, and he hasn't been in the NBA that long, but he's already led the Warriors to 2 NBA championships. He's one of the most successful basketball players ever, and I think we assert that one of the reasons why is because he sticks to the team norms, and the Warriors play by these. So team norms, by definition, right, they play a critical role in shaping the emotional experience of participating in a team. And, we define them as just the unwritten rules, these unsaid behaviors that are just happening. So we invite you to bring some definition to them, bring some clarity, shine a flashlight on what they are. This is culture, right? Because these norms determine this very important fact that whether we feel safe or threatened on a team. That's what these norms are all about. Do we feel safe? Because if we feel safe, then we will make more choices, and those choices motivate us. If we feel safe, we can make mistakes, right? If we feel safe, we can tell our leaders or our managers about the mistakes we made. And as managers, we can tell our direct reports about the mistakes we've made and what we've learned from those mistakes, right? If we play by the norms, right, and establish them, we can actually let our people be in more control because there's not as much guessing. They know what's there and not. And so strong cohesion is formed when we have team norms, right? From behaviors that create this sense of togetherness, create this sense of safety. And when we talk about safety, we talk specifically about psychological safety. And that's just the shared belief held by every member on the team that this group is a safe place for taking risks, for making mistakes. We don't want to make mistakes. Sometimes we really do want to take risks because what's working isn't maybe the best approach, or because we need to innovate. But that's what we mean by these team norms. A really good example of a cohesive team is the original team in Saturday Night Live. It's one of the best cases that we found at Talent Catalyst to illustrate what team norms look like and what it means to build a collaborative, cohesive team. No matter what your background is, where you come from, you can still do it. So Saturday Night Live started in the mid-'70s. And Lorne Michaels, he's a 37-year-old creator of the show. He hired comedians that he already knew, which was interesting, but these comedians are from all over, not just the US, but also Canada, right? So they came from Chicago, they came from LA, they came from Canada. They all moved to New York City in a very dangerous time to be in New York City, right? The mid-'70s, early '80s in New York were not its brightest moments, and we're based in New York, so we feel pretty comfortable talking about it. And so when you read the entries, like just the journal entries of this original cast of Saturday Night Live, they talk about how scary New York was, and they talk about how they didn't know anybody. They showed up, Saturday Night Live studios are near the Hell's Kitchen area of New York, and they showed up and they didn't know a soul. And at that point, it was part of the red light district of New York. It just wasn't safe. And what they ended up doing as a team was fascinating because they started building this cohesive team because they really didn't have anybody else. And so Malcolm Gladwell writes a couple remarks about them, and he says that everyone knew everyone, and everyone was always in everyone else's business, and the fact goes a long way toward explaining the extraordinary chemistry that was built on the cast. So here's built in the cast. So here's a quote from the cast, and they said we were all like 21 or 22 years old. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any clue what we were doing. So we spent all our time trying to make each other laugh. And we ate every meal together. We went to the same bars every night. We were terrified that if we were separated, one of us might get lost and never be heard of again. So you see that they were kind of forced to bond, and that created tremendous results in terms of a unified team. Amongst people that didn't necessarily want to be unified. They just kind of had to, right? It's interesting what we do when we have to. And so what motivated these guys was, first of all, comedy, and second of all, was safety. This is like quite literally safety. And that was interesting. And I would say a third thing that really motivated them was belonging, a sense of unity and a sense of belonging. So here are 5 key norms for successful teams, okay? So number 1 is teams need to believe that their work is important. So at Saturday Night Live, this was the first type of programming that had ever been rolled out in this comedic form. That it had never been done before. And they believed that they were revolutionizing comedy and bringing it to mainstream America, which was really important to them. They also believed that their work was meaningful to them. This was their calling in life, right? If you talk to an Amy Poehler and you talk to that original cast, like this is what they were called to do. They also had very clear goals. They had very defined roles. They knew they could depend on each other, and they felt safe. And that was the most important piece that made Saturday Night Live the success that it was and that it still is. And that's significant. We also believe that at Talent Catalyst. Like I think our team, we've really strived hard with each other to find the meaning that's in it for all of us, because we both believe that this work is fundamentally important for yourselves as managers and for the younger workforce to thrive every single day at work. We believe that your Mondays and Fridays should be just as good as your Saturdays and Sundays, and that there should be purpose in it. And it should also be revenue generating, right? And that we can actually meet the bottom line a lot more successfully with less energy on our part when we're thriving at work and when we're motivated. So our Thrivival tip number 2 is to unify and shift from the ego to the community. And that's again what Saturday Night Live did, is you had all these comedians with huge egos, right? Theatrical folks with huge egos. They just got selected to come to New York City, and they found themselves completely dependent on building a community because their egos just wouldn't last. And that's significant. It's a significant case for us. Okay, so let's go to tip number 3 here. Focus on their motivators, or focus on your motivators first and then their motivators when it comes to thriving and motivating your millennial teams. So this is a good example from Caroline that she was willing to share. Caroline worked at Citibank for over 8 years, and her last role at Citibank, she'd been in it for about 18 months. And she found herself surviving a lot of her Mondays through Fridays, a lot. And this was hard for her because she had gone through a 2-year rotational program where she got to learn all sorts of different competencies and disciplines and roles within the business, and that was a place where she thrived. And so, having come into this new role, she thought it would get better after a year or so, and it didn't. And she found herself working with a very challenging manager with very little leadership, which she was used to at the bank, and not a lot of learning and development opportunities, which is critical for millennials. It's more critical than compensation. So she came across a manager that's like, her old manager saw capability in Caroline, but both parties were extremely frustrated. And eventually that old manager actually left the bank. And a new manager was hired to specifically help develop the necessary skills for Caroline to be promoted and competency to grow into her next role. So she started working with this new manager. And one thing became very different very quickly, is that her new manager started using data, started using motivation data. And what you see up on the screen is an assessment that we run with our clients called What Motivates Me. And this is a look at Caroline's top 5 motivators. So she's very motivated by friendship, service, and there's challenge, problem solving, and last but not least, excitement. And in this assessment, there are 23 motivators total. And in these top 5, when Caroline saw this data herself, she realized, oh, yeah, my former manager never tried to be quote unquote friends with me, because that wasn't the role, right? She was my manager, and there was no friend and manager. They were 2 distinct roles. And so while she was a good manager, Caroline was looking for a friendship. Now, for those of you on the line, this may sound familiar when thinking about your millennials. So how do you keep that boundary between authority and friend? And what Caroline's new manager did was she honored that boundary very, very well. But she would ask Caroline like how her weekend was. She would ask her what her hobbies were. She would ask her, like if she was looking forward to what she was doing that night. So she really like made an effort to get to know Caroline as a person beyond the role that she was currently in. And that made a big difference in Caroline's motivation to perform in that role. Same with service, right? So Caroline would like ask her manager if she wanted to buy her lunch. and or like just go to lunch, right? Or bring her back something from Starbucks or whatever it was. And so this manager, that wasn't customary to her, but she started realizing that that was Caroline's way of showing that she wanted to invest in the relationship professionally, right? So she started doing that. Long story short, this manager was smart, and she took her results, she highlighted Caroline's top motivators, and she helped Caroline leverage them to get to that next level in her career. Together, they laid out a plan to get specific experiences where Caroline could use her top motivators to shine in that current role and hopefully her next role. So together, they sat down, they reviewed her results to match their commonalities between one another and their differences. And what they found is a lot of their differences were actually complementary. And that has had a significant impact on their working relationship, all of this, like reviewing the data and laying out a plan and actually not just assuming that they knew what one another was like, but really looking at what the data showed them. And to this day, if you ask Caroline what her experience was with her last manager at Citibank, she'll say, well, she was the best manager I've ever had. Excuse me, not her last manager. I think things may have been different if that was the case, but she was the best manager I've ever had. She really understood from the beginning what I wanted to do in my career and aligned objectives to make that happen for me. I continue to measure every manager against her. So that was significant. Her manager didn't give her the same amount of time that another manager gave her. Her manager didn't give her the same amount of feedback necessarily that the other manager gave her, but she knew her. She knew her as a person, and she used her motivation data, and that made the difference for Caroline. We worked with a client recently called Wedding Wire, and their wedding software company, and we worked with their managers. And this was the #1 thing we told them is, guys, you're a data-driven company. Have data on your sales teams, the teams that you're managing, and first, have data on yourselves. What motivates you? Because whatever motivates you is going to have a direct impact on your sales team. And do you actually have the data to know what gets them engaged? You're spread out across the country. You're in sales teams, right? In the field. And so they started using motivation data to change the performance of their sales teams. And they were already doing very well. But what it did is they started coming up with structures, like more formal structures to check in with their team, because they realized that millennials, and this company is 90% millennial, they realized that their millennials really do need to be in more constant communication. And that showed up from their data as well. Another thing that showed up was just this need for purpose. It wasn't just like an idea or a stereotype, but really connecting what they did as individual salespeople to what the goals of the manager were, the goals of the team were, and then what the goals of the company were. And most of the managers that we interviewed, we said, guys, do your millennials and do the people on your sales team, do they know what your top 3 to 5 key business results are? And it was fascinating. They smiled a little bit and said, actually, no, I don't think they do. I don't think we've communicated that. And we said, well, if your millennials are motivated by X, Y, Z according to their assessments, then it would be a good idea to share that information. And they said yes. So this was a great experience for us. So Thriveable tip #3 is focus. Focus on the data, right? Instead of making assumptions and being assumption driven, be data driven. Just like you would for your clients, with your technologies, with your products, with your customer sets. Be data driven on yourselves and on your teams. Okay. Motivation tip #4 is that everyone has a voice. Everyone. Even perhaps the people that you might not want to have a voice every day or every week. Everyone has a voice. And so your roles as leaders is to practice what we call equal voice, right? Give everyone a chance to talk. And we know on our team and other teams, there are some folks that that don't talk at all, and we wish would talk more. And there are some folks that talk more than their fair share of talking. And there are always insights in there, but sometimes we wish it was more equally distributed. And so we invite you on the webinar to practice equal voice. There's 3 other components to this as a leader, because you know as leaders that your part of your role is to model these. And we think out of all the tips that this is the most challenging. We think it's easy to understand it here and be really driven to go do it, but it's harder to understand it here. And so how do we do this, right? And so our role as a leader, we've broken it down into these 4 parts when it comes to motivation and motivating specifically millennials. Millennials are sensitive. I know that's a broad statement, and take it as a broad statement, please, because every millennial is a human and they are different, right, than one another. So be socially sensitive. Our ability to intuit how our team members feel is based on things that we don't really check ourselves on every day. It's based on the tone of our voice. It's based on how we hold ourselves. It's based on our facial expression, right? All these things play a role into how our millennials receive our leadership, how they receive our direction and our management and our coaching for that part. Also, take responsibility for our individual involvement. So ensure that team members feel listened to and heard. Ensure that they feel welcome to respond and welcome to make those mistakes, even when they're in meetings. Again, it goes back to that place of psychological safety. How can we create these for our people? And one key way to create it is to be a listener, really. Like model listening. And when we say model listening, we're referring to active listening, where I listen to my direct or I listen to my colleague and I repeat back, not like a robot, right? But like I repeat back what they say to ensure that A, my assumptions are accurate, but B, that I've heard them correctly. And I guess with C, another reason to actively listen is so that they can hear themselves. They can hear themselves on loudspeaker. And most of the time, we don't give even just our peers that opportunity as often as we think would be effective at Talent Catalyst. So we put a mindset around this, and we call it the SWIFT mindset, right? Because these things here on this slide, while we know that they're the good thing to do, they're not always easy when we have a big workload or when we're just trying to get things done in a day. So at Talent Catalyst, we have to remind ourselves of this. Like we put a Post-it note up on our desktops or our laptops or on our desk to help us think SWIFT. And SWIFT is the opposite of the old acronym WIFM, which some of you may be familiar with, this what's in it for me. SWIFT is the opposite. SWIFT is saying, so what's in it for them? Wouldn't it be amazing? Like think about what the impact would be if we woke up every day thinking, I wonder what's in it for my team member today. I wonder what's in it for my team's ability to achieve the results this week. I wonder what's in it for Brian to work on this project today and tomorrow. Like, do we think like that? We all have the capability to do it, but what would the impact be if we did? Same goes for our personal relationships. What would change, and what would change swiftly is the key thing to ask. So this was an interesting experience we had with a client, Zions Bank. We were working with them, and they were saying, hey, listen, we have two big challenges. One is the attracting new millennial talent, and the second one is retaining them, right? And so what they did is they put together a strategy group, which was super powerful, where they provided equal voice. They brought them from different banks within their unified Zions Bank, different parts of the country, different roles, different responsibilities, and they put everybody together to start creating a strategy on how to solve for these two issues. And the attention I actually want to give here is to the leader here. She was the leader of recruiting. And she said, I don't want to do this alone. And in fact, would I look like a superwoman if I did? Yes. But I want to hear from everybody on my team. And I really want to understand what motivates them when they recruit new millennials, what motivates them when they attract and sustain the relationships with millennials, what's working for them with regards to retention and engagement, what's working with them when it comes to recruitment and attraction. So she really was motivated by their motivations. So she came in and said, I'm basically going to build a SWIFT team. And so she did. And she put together this SWIFT strategy group, and what they ended up coming up with is a 12-month plan, which they're in the process of presenting to their senior leadership to see if they can roll out these new ideas that they generated over the course of time working together as this group. And if you see on the wall of the glass wall in this picture, there's flip chart paper up. And this is how committed they were to being unified as a team because they were motivated by each other. So that's a social network they drew on the wall with Instagram, like mini Polaroid cameras, and they have Polaroid pictures. And they have lines that are drawing what they have in common, whether they work together or whether they have similar identities, right, and similar data. So that was a pretty neat thing to see. So Thrive tip number 4 is to model the behavior you want to see. As leaders, that's our job, right? And so the shift we're requesting or inviting you to take is to talk less and listen more. And not only just listen, but actively listen and repeat back, right? All right. And this brings us to our fifth and final tip on how to motivate your teams, your millennial teams, which is coach like your life depends on it. Millennials love to be coached. They love to be supported. And if you think about the role that a coach plays, right? A coach is there. It's impossible, I'll always say, to be on the sidelines and on the court at the same time. And a coach is that mirror. A coach is that person that can actually watch you play the game at work and show you the plays that were effective and just let you decide. We're just going to show you the footage and you choose what worked well for you and what didn't and what you'd like to change. That's a coach. So our question for you on the webinar is, what type of conversations are you struggling with the most with your millennial teams? What type? Because coaching is nothing more than a conversation. It's all it is. We want to simplify that for all of you. So what are you struggling with? And we're going to show you a list of conversations that we struggle with, that our clients struggle with. So take a look. There's quite a few of them. I'm going to pop them both up here, give you a minute to read them. Career development could be one. We've had clients say, I can't believe I need to talk about our dress code, but I do. Maybe you're going through a reorg. Maybe you need to talk about compensation. Maybe you have some younger workforce team members who are asking to be promoted. How do you have that conversation? Sometimes it's easy to say yes. Oftentimes the answer isn't yes. Sometimes we're talking about setting expectations with our millennial team members or getting buy-in from them. And some of them are optimistic, some of them are resistant. Maybe we're having a conversation with overly emotional employees, at least that's how we perceive them to be. Maybe we're just trying to connect, right? So food for thought here, but think about what types of conversations you're struggling with the most. And ask yourself the question, why? Like, why do you struggle in these conversations? Why do all of us struggle in these conversations? There's two reasons often. Number one is time. Like, it takes time to have conversations, especially about comp or a layoff or something really significant. And number two is maybe we don't know how to have them, right? Has anybody taught us how to formally coach? How many of you on the line have graduated from coaching programs, coaching certification programs? How many of you are members of the International Coaching Federation? Maybe some of you are, which is fantastic. We are a talent catalyst, but maybe some of you aren't. There's a high chance you aren't. And so all of a sudden this coaching word is such a buzz that's happening. Millennials love it. iGen loves it. It's kind of the new norm, right? Coaching's never been hotter. But do we have the time to coach, and do we know how to coach? And the biggest thing with these kind of conversations is that they require a risk, and we don't want to fail. We don't wake up on a Monday morning going, awesome, I can't wait to go to work today so I can fail. That sounds fun, right? None of us do that. So the question we ask to ourselves and to you is, what's the cost? What's the cost to us and to you to not take the risk? To not take the risk to coach and to have those conversations that we showed on the slide. How much energy does it cost? How much time does it cost? How much money does it cost, right? Because it could be costing us time. It could be costing us remote work access. It could be costing us compensation. It could be costing us managing a larger team. Maybe that's what we want to do. It could be costing us a leadership position that we're really going for. It could be costing us credibility. It could be costing us that international opportunity that we're excited about. It could be costing us authority. It could be costing us a promotion. And last but not least, in some cases, we've seen it cost people their jobs to not have the conversation they know they should have in the time frame that they should have it. So what we've developed at Talent Catalyst is a simplified approach to coaching, and it's what we call great coaching. And we offer it's a 3-step process. And the first part of the process in this conversation, this first conversation is 10 minutes, 5 minutes each way. And it's designed to help your teams get clear on what you as a manager expect of them and what they expect of you, or expect of the role, or expect of the project, or expect of the day or the week. And then once that conversation happens, you move on to coach on the progress of that conversation that happened, the progress on really the commitment that happens in that first conversation. And then the last coaching conversation that we teach from there is, how can you help your millennial learn, grow, and develop? Within millennial motivators, if you look at them as a generation, in their top 5 motivators, their number 1 motivator is the opportunity to learn and grow. So we built a coaching conversation so that you can have some structure around how to meet that motivator that millennials have across the board, in which they actually turn down jobs if that's not an option. So that's the third type. Again, a structured, focused way to have these conversations that align us on expectations, that help us check in on the progress of the conversation, and then lastly, help us, instead of assessing or reviewing someone, which millennials do not like, and performance management is shifting anyway, really working on how they can develop and grow. Oh, sorry, the slide animation. We forgot about this. Thank you for bearing with us. Just think of it as a dance. It's a coaching dance. We're almost done. There we go. Again, so this model is there designed to help you have these types of conversations, to coach more often, and coach with more confidence every time you go do it, without taking up a full hour or taking up even 30 minutes if you don't want it to. So our 5th Thrivival tip is coach. And we invite you to take the shift from being distracted to being focused in your coaching conversations. And when we say distracted, we don't mean that you're doing 800 other things. We just mean, what would it look like with yourself and with the person you're speaking to give 10 minutes of presence, 10 minutes of focus on Swift, so what's in it for them to talk to you, right? And this kind of thing. Okay, so that brings us almost to time here on this webinar. Is your head spinning yet? Great news. If it is, it's because you've been taking in all of this data, right? So today we promised you, just to recap, to teach you a proven step-by-step strategy so that you can quickly identify how to motivate yourself, strategically teach your team to motivate themselves, and number 3, conduct motivating conversations to build relationships of trust with your team. And we want to leave you with a few things, and that first and foremost is a growth challenge. You got to have a growth challenge so that you can be as nimble as this cat. This is my favorite image. I hope you guys enjoy this cat, because how cute is that? There he goes. Okay. So this week, here's the deal. Number 1, identify one member of your team and encourage them to speak up 2 times this week, right? So equal voice, encourage them to speak up. You all know who that person is, right? So encourage them to speak up 2 times this week. Challenge number 2 is allow yourself to make 1 mistake this week and tell a direct report what you learned from it. That's a juicy one. That is a good one. Millennials love this one. And then number 3, when someone asks you for help this week, whether it's 5 minutes, you know, that knock on the door, hey, do you have a minute? Right? Or if it's, hey, can we sit down for half an hour? I'll send you a calendar invite. That. Practice actively listening to him or her. Listen, repeat back, listen and repeat back. Do that in your style, your tone, your way, but make sure they're heard, and make sure that you aren't just running off of assumptions, that you really have got them right. And we'll leave you with this quote from Brené Brown, who's a behavioral scientist based in Texas. And she says, we're going to need to intentionally be with people who are different from us. We're going to have to sign up, join, and take a seat at the table. We're going to have to learn how to listen, have hard conversations, look for joy, share pain, and be more curious than defensive, all while seeking moments of togetherness. This is work today. This is the future of work. This is what your millennials expect from you. It's what they expect from their companies, and it's what they expect from the workplace. And when they feel heard, when they feel that it's okay to make mistakes, when it's okay to share things about their weekend, when it's okay to share things that didn't go as well, that hurt, without us as managers and leaders being defensive, that starts to build that psychological safety, which, whether we like it or not, is a reality in today's workforce and in our future workforce. So with that said, congratulations. You have finished the webinar. We are so, again, grateful that you have been here with us today. And we want to know how we can help you. If you're interested in having a conversation or furthering the one that we've had on today's webinar, we're happy to take a call. If you are interested in running a workshop to educate your workforce and your managers on how to motivate your millennials, how to educate your first new time managers, how to educate your managers who are have longer tenures and are now working with millennials, we offer half and full day workshops. We also do keynotes for your lunch and learns, for your company events or retreats, 60 to 90-minute speaking engagements. And last but not least, we offer coaching services. So if you yourself could benefit from coaching, or you have team members that would benefit from one-to-one or group coaching, we are happy to help you with that. Also, we might be nearby you. We spend our time at Talent Catalyst split, 2 offices, New York City being one and then San Francisco being the other. So if we are nearby you, we're happy to talk to you and then set up a face-to-face meeting. We love meeting people. We love meeting your millennial teams, so we're open to that. Last but not least, there's a gift. We promised a gift, and we love it. If you look out for your email that's going to come from GoToWebinar, and there's going to be a link in that to the assessment, an assessment code. So look for that. That will be your gift. We don't want to forget. And last but not least, here's our information. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us. We'll, let's see, how many minutes are we giving you back? 10 minutes. And if you need to email us, it's info@thetalentcatalyst.com. That's our number that we can be reached. And we're open to questions right now. We'd love to answer anything you have. And then if you would stay on, the feedback screen will pop up. We'd love to hear how we can improve the webinar experience for you. So thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic Thursday and weekend. And we are here for any questions that you have.
Feel free to put any questions in the box if you guys have them. All right, looks like we don't have any questions. Thanks everyone for listening today, and just a reminder again, please fill out this survey at the end of the webinar. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye.
Thank you.